Hi there, and welcome back to the Explaining History YouTube channel. And if you're watching this, it's probably because you're doing an assignment on the subject of imperialism. So I'm going to give a brief description here of what we mean when we talk about imperialism, and it's a general catch-all term. It's a general catch-all description, shall I say. So hopefully in future videos I'll go into some more specifics. But imperialism basically is where one country, normally an empire or a kingdom, though it doesn't have to be, projects its power over other territories. So that can mean direct military conquest of another country, or it can mean the economic exploitation of that country without necessarily having troops on the ground. There are numerous different types of imperialism. If you look at, say, for example, the Nazis during the Second World War, they directly conquered countries such as Poland, and they set about a vast and extremely violent reordering of Polish society. But British imperialism, such as the incorporation of India into the British Empire, didn't work in quite the same way, and India is only fully directly controlled as a colony from London after 1857. Well over 100 years since the British began to really control the Indian economy. In both instances, the thing that makes it unifies both kinds of imperialism is the economic exploitation of the territory, so that there is a net flow of wealth from the colonized country through to the colonizer. Now, imperialism and colonialism are similar, but not exactly the same things. Colonialism, as the term suggests, is the establishment of colonies. Somewhere like Iraq could be said after 2003 to have come within an American empire of sorts, but it's not been directly colonized by Americans. There are American soldiers there and American diplomats, but large numbers of people from Wichita or Florida haven't wound up living in parts of Basra. They just haven't done. So imperialism and colonialism are like kind of like a Venn diagram. Often they overlap, but they don't necessarily always have to. It's possible to extract wealth from a country without settling it with your people. The culture that exists around imperialism you can normally see within the parent country, the mother country, so to speak, the colonizer or the imperial metropole, as it's referred to. And in that society, you will often see justifications for imperialism, and there will be all manner of educational initiatives to educate the population into supporting imperialism, and that often involves an explanation as to how they benefit as well. So, in the 19th century, it was important to convince poor factory workers in Lancashire or dock workers in London that they were beneficiaries of empire and kind of included, and that a culture of imperialism emerged which had elements of racism in it and often became deeply racist because it told white British people in the 19th century that they were a superior sort of person and from a superior kind of culture by dint of the fact that they controlled, or their country controlled, large parts of Africa and Asia. And a exciting and glamorous depiction of empire in books, magazines, pamphlets, songs, and novels emerged, and there are all sorts of famous writers such as Rudyard Kipling and that kind of thing who told, and Rider Haggard who told tales of empire and that glamorized it and really kind of sketched over the unpleasant realities. And so imperialism and racial thinking they don't necessarily always in every instance exist in their entirety together, but in most cases there's a kind of an overlap in the Venn diagram, so to speak. The question of racial thinking, why I refer to it as that and not racism, is because in the late 19th, early 20th century, racial thinking was a fairly commonplace notion. Ideas such as eugenics, racialism, and the idea that there seemed to be some kind of natural hierarchy between the races were not necessarily at the absolute centre ground of political and intellectual life in Europe, but they certainly existed in a non-marginalised space. They weren't the hideous and repulsive ideas that we know them to be today. They were seen to some extent as being self-evident, and throughout British society, racial ideas were able to be articulated, and it's only really been our experience of things like Nazism and the civil rights movement in America and apartheid in South Africa that's had a significant impact in changing these attitudes and leaving them on the margins or absolutely shunning them from acceptable conversation, which is what, of course, normal and moral and kind and decent human beings do. Anyway, I'll continue this in a video or two's time, and we'll talk some more about empire and specific examples of how the British Empire developed throughout the 19th century.